These are the stories of women who committed their crimes in different eras, on different continents, for different reasons. For love.
Whenever she found disappointment with the current husband, she disposed of him and went on to the next one.
For money.
By all accounts, she was pleasant. It's just that she couldn't stop killing people for gain.
For attention.
She wasn't only killing, she was saving patients too.
For escape.
All I was thinking of was getting rid of him.
But to the criminal profiler, they are a disturbing sisterhood.
Whereas you or I may go out for a jog, these people kill.
A criminal class beyond suspicion.
Do nurses in Northampton go to work every day thinking, oh, I have to be on the lookout for a serial killer?
Using the most effective tools.
She was just a real nice little old lady.
Their gender.
Played the role perfectly.
And their weapon of choice, poison.
To sit back and watch someone who's slowly being eaten away from the inside out is vicious.
In the Tulsa City Library in Oklahoma, Sherby Green confronts her demons.
Every family has the proverbial skeleton in their closet. Actually, my family has quite a few of them.
Sherby's family skeletons remained hidden by her protective father.
He said, you better just leave things alone. Just leave them where they're at. He said, you might just find out a whole lot more that you don't want to know.
Now, after 50 years, Sherby Green wants the truth. Why her third cousin became one of America's most notorious serial killers, Nanny Doss.
From her track record, it looks that anyone who got on her wrong side, they signed their own death warrant.
Nanny is thought to have killed 14 people, all by poison. Over the next week, Sherby hopes to meet her murderous cousin, even though Nanny's been dead for 38 years.
Well, there's a couple of things that I hope to find out, but I guess the most prominent one would be the why, to understand the woman.
Sherby's search will take her to the darkest corners of the human mind.
A killer's family has a very difficult time balancing out mentally what has happened.
Dr. Deborah Sherman Coughlin knows Sherby's destination. A criminal profiler for 17 years, Dr. Sherman Coughlin has investigated and interviewed many murderers. But intriguing her most are female killers, and why most of them turn to poison.
They typically choose poisons because they tend to be in a caregiver role, and they have access to feeding an individual or injecting an individual. It's something that's easy for them to obtain. It's something that is more difficult to trace.
Poison is an ancient weapon. Convenient, non-confrontational, secretive. Statistically, women are 5 times as likely to use it as men.
It's more difficult for a female to wield a knife and use a knife to cut a victim, whereas it's a lot easier to put poison in someone's food. A female serial killer will choose a victim who's already helpless. They will choose young children. They will choose the elderly. they will choose sick victims. They will choose family members who are close to them. So they're choosing someone who is already somewhat under their control.
From 1945 to 1954, Nanny Doss uses her kitchen to kill 4 husbands. Victim Sam Doss is a typical study.
I believe he was a very quiet, very strict man due to his religious beliefs. He didn't let her play the radio, wouldn't let her run the fan at night, wouldn't let her go next door to a neighbor's house and watch TV. And he just got tired of having to follow his strict house rules and decided she wanted out of it.
One day, Nanny adds rat poison, available at the corner store, to Sam's favorite dessert, stewed prunes.
Poison Control Center, how may I help you? How long ago was this?
I would take him to the emergency room as soon as possible.
If Sam Doss was poisoned today, this type of facility might have saved his life.
Wipe out his mouth with some room temperature water.
We get about 200 or so calls a day. I would say over the course of a year, we probably get about 60,000 calls.
Dr. Lewis Nelson deals with accidental poisonings at New York City's Poison Control Center.
Sure, go ahead. There's a lot of poisoning going on because there's a lot of chemicals out there. There's a lot of medicines out there. There's a lot of occupational exposures as well. So there is a lot of poisoning going on.
Occasionally, among Dr. Nelson's cases is arsenic, the active ingredient in Nanny's rat poison.
Arsenic's been used for thousands of years. It's a naturally occurring poison. It comes in rock formations and you can extract it fairly easily. It's been identified as being toxic for literally thousands of years, and it's been used over the millennium as homicidal agents to knock off powerful figures and emperors and other figures like that.
Tasteless and odorless, arsenic moves quickly through the bloodstream. Within 30 minutes, Sam Doss's major organs will be contaminated. But this time, due to an overdose, Sam's body fights back.
If you ingest something that irritates your stomach, what happens is that the stomach essentially contracts in reverse and squeezes from the bottom up. At the same time, the sphincter, the muscle that controls the opening and closing of the esophagus, opens, allowing the food to come from the stomach up into the esophagus and then out through the mouth. And that would be vomiting.
This reflex action stops much of the poison from entering Sam's bloodstream. Although ill, he will not die.
She overdid it that time. The first time she gave him enough to make him sick enough to throw it up, so it didn't have any effect.
Sherby Green tracks down a first-hand account of Nanny's next steps.
Heidi.
I'm Sherby Gray.
Sherby?
W. Dean Heidi, MD, is a respected Tulsa banker. In 1954, he was Sam Doss's doctor.
I first saw Sam in my office. He was quite ill, and this was during a flu epidemic in Tulsa, and we were seeing lots of people, but he was so ill, I felt that he needed to be admitted to the hospital. And I don't recall exactly how long he was in, 3 or 4 days maybe, but he improved, got better, and we sent him home.
But Sam's days are numbered.
This time she measured it out and she got it right.
The smaller dose is carried swiftly to Sam's organs.
Arsenic is what's known as a multi-system toxin or a multi-organ toxin. It pretty much poisons everything.
Arsenic strikes at the core of almost every cell. Energy powerhouses called mitochondria. Here, food is turned into energy, keeping us alive. It's known as the Krebs cycle, and arsenic shuts it down by blocking crucial enzymes.
And when your enzymes in your individual cells don't work, the cells fail. When the cells fail, the organs fail, and when the organs fail, the body fails.
Sam's brain, kidneys, liver, and lungs are being starved of energy.
An individual who poisons a human being is sinister. To sit back and watch someone who's slowly being eaten away from the inside out is vicious. It's immoral. You have to have no conscience to sit back and watch someone, especially someone you know, slowly deteriorating in front of your eyes.
Under the cover of an anguished wife, Nanny admits Sam to the hospital. Sam's doctor is perplexed.
I had several specialists take a look at him to see if there was something that I was missing, and they couldn't come up with anything. But he continued just to go downhill and died.
But is there anything in particular that stuck in your memory about Nanny?
Well, other than she was just a real nice little old lady who played the role perfectly.
That's the masks that they wear. They hide behind that assumption that a little old lady couldn't possibly have done this. They use that to their advantage so that they can be more effective in their murdering.
The frightening thing is Sam wasn't the first. He was the last in a long line of deaths that surrounded Nanny by poisoning.
"14 of Nanny's family or friends perish. She defies suspicion for 27 years, but not for much longer. Sam Doss will have his revenge from the grave."
I have here a copy of his death certificate, and if you'll notice, it's all typed in, except the cause of death and, of course, my signature, because they didn't know what to type.
After Dr. Heidi's late revelation of arsenic poison, Nanny is arrested and charged. But the real hero is a science forged a century before, across the Atlantic. A time when Victorian England is gripped by a poison epidemic, breeding their most notorious female killer. The forensic toxicology used to convict Nanny Doss was refined in England's 19th century medical laboratories.
Toxicology, as a newly developing subject, spends an awful lot of time talking about arsenic and trying to develop more and more sophisticated tests to detect it.
For medical historian Dr. Ian Burney, there's no doubt why Victorian scientists were obsessed with arsenic.
Victorian England is awash in poison. It's on the wallpaper. It's in the medicines. It's in the sweets. It's on the floors to kill the vermin. So it's available.
By the 1850s, arsenic murders are rampant. The salt earns a nickname, inheritance powder. Extracting it from victims, exposing evidence, becomes a forensic fixation.
It was actually considered in Victorian times the crime of the age. The crudeness of the past had given way to more refined and civilized ways of interacting, so they had a civilized way of murdering.
And the most civilized of all will be Mary Ann Cotton, England's worst female serial killer.
By all accounts, she was pleasant. She'd been a nurse twice. She'd been a good nurse, a caring nurse. It's just that she couldn't stop killing people for gain.
Detective Inspector Paul Heslop solved many murders before he retired.
I used to be a constable here and later on a detective constable.
Now a crime writer, his imagination draws him to Britain's most poisonous woman.
I think it was a woman in search for security in those days, you know. A woman didn't have anything. You know, they had to have the man for the house and the job that went with it and everything else.
In the 1800s, marriage means security. By coincidence, Paul Heslop's old beat passes the church where Mary Ann wed one of her victims on September 17, 1870.
I think when she came here and got married to Frederick Cotton, she probably thought she had a catch, if you like. She had a working man, she had an income, she had a family, she had a house. But then, as time passed, it seemed there was always something else manifested, and Mary Ann wanted that. She wanted the something else. And once she wanted something else, it was just too easy to get rid of what she'd got to get the something else.
On their first wedding anniversary, Frederick Cotton is in no condition to celebrate. He's dying of arsenic poison. Mary Ann poisons for profit.
Burial clubs were a common way for poorer members of society to ensure that their loved ones had a decent and proper funeral that they could pay for.
Burial insurance extends to children. The Cotton's year-old son dies of poison 6 months after Frederick.
You pay a couple of pence per month into a fund, and after a certain period of time, you will be allocated a lump sum. So you could, for the investment of, I don't know, sort of 20 pence over the course of a few years, you could potentially be seeing a return of 3, 4, 5, 10 pounds.
Early death and a pauper's burial delivers dividends.
Once again, my condolences, man.
And because arsenic symptoms mimic gastric infections, common at this time of poor hygiene, Mary Ann is above suspicion. It's thought she poisons 3 husbands, a lover, her mother, a friend, and at least 12 of her own children and stepchildren.
Well, not just a woman, but a person who would kill her own flesh and blood would appear to me to be callous and ruthless. And in Mary Ann Cotton's case, if it was done for gain, particularly so.
More than 130 years later, Sherby Green discovers Nanny also killed 2 of her children.
It's the worst that she could have done, is to poison her own children. It's believed she poisoned her sisters, her mother, many other family members, but her own children, her own flesh and blood. You know, these are the children that she carried for 9 months that she gave life to.
A mother could kill her own flesh and blood if she is a psychopath or if she is insane. The psychopath is the individual who has no bonding or no attachments and no empathy for others. The only person who matters to the psychopath is the psychopath.
Criminal profiler Dr. Deborah Sherman Coughlin believes Nanny and Mary Ann share another trait. They were drifters, using distance to blur the pattern of their misfortune.
If you have one body in one jurisdiction and one body in another jurisdiction, if they're not talking to each other, then you have what's called linkage blindness, where they don't see that these crimes are related.
But one piece of police work can't be fooled by gender or geography. A technique still used today in modern toxicology labs, like the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in New York.
We very rarely see arsenic cases, but every once in a while, if there is a suspicion of an acute arsenic overdose, we do use the range test to screen for arsenic.
Head of the lab is Dr. Marina Stajic.
So it's a very simple test. 3 pieces of copper wire. And I have a positive control that contains a known amount of arsenic, a negative control, and a urine sample, which we're going to test for the presence of arsenic. This is what they would have done in Mary Ann Cotton's day.
After heating with hydrochloric acid, the poison in the positive control and the urine sample should be revealed.
This was the negative control. The copper wire didn't change.
The arsenic emerges. Deposited on the wire is a black metallic coating.
What was the unknown specimen, there is also a black deposit. These two would indicate the presence of arsenic.
Developed more than 160 years ago by scientist Hugo Reinsch, the test helps convict Mary Ann Cotton and Nanny Doss.
Arsenic is actually one of the easier poisons to detect. One of the reasons being that it's actually a mineral poison, so it stays in the body.
The dead can speak, their bodies revealing all to the toxicologist. Mary Ann is sentenced to death by hanging. Her notoriety becomes a nursery rhyme.
Mary Ann Cotton, she's dead and she's rotten. She lies in a bed with her eyes wide open. Sing, sing, what can I sing? Mary Ann Cotton is tied up with string. Where, up in the air.
You was asking about the electric chair. Let me take you over and...
Nanny Doss is more fortunate. She is spared the electric chair, now displayed at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary Museum.
It's not still plugged up, is it?
No, it's over here in the back corner.
In 1955, no Oklahoma judge wants to be first to execute a woman.
Now, this is what y'all nicknamed Sparky, is that
This is the one that was nicknamed Sparky.
It's not a very pretty picture, is it?
No. I think we've executed 81 or 2 in the electric chair, and the last one was in 1966.
Was there ever a woman in it?
No, ma'am.
I think that knowing how many she actually murdered with her poisonous potion, I think she deserved the chair. I really did. To be allowed to live after she took so many lives is, to me, it was a reward.
The evolving science of toxicology brings many poisoners undone. But to this day, a clever, educated, determined woman can defy detection. Night duty. Veterans Affairs Hospital, Northampton, Massachusetts, 1995. it should be a quiet time of convalescing. But one nurse will see that it's not. Kristen Gilbert murders her patients using the ultimate cover: her gender and her profession. In Massachusetts, she becomes known as the Angel of Death.
Do nurses in Northampton go to work every day thinking, oh, I have to be on the lookout for a serial killer? Absolutely not. They don't want to believe it.
Author M. William Phelps, who covered this case, says Kristen believed she was committing the perfect crime. She was above suspicion, her weapon untraceable.
Here you have a blonde, 30-year-old soccer mom driving around in an SUV during the day, taking her kids to soccer practice, volunteering her time at the homeless shelters.
Professionally, Kristen is smart, reacting swiftly in emergencies. No one knows she is creating them.
Henry Houdin was a 35-year-old vet. He was a physically healthy human being, and he had been admitted to the hospital because he had this severe case of the flu. Now, Gilbert, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office, injects him with a dose of epinephrine.
The drug epinephrine stimulates the heart. It's commonly used to treat cardiac arrest, but it can also induce one.
The feeling you get when you run, which is increasing sense of your heart beating or palpitations, your blood pressure rises, you flush. These type of symptoms are exactly what you expect when somebody's given epinephrine.
Picture this. Epinephrine's injected into your arm. Your arm immediately gets hot and it starts burning. Your heart starts racing out of control and you go into massive cardiac arrest.
Kristen calls an emergency code, a hospital alert to the cardiopulmonary resuscitation unit, or CPR. Little does the CPR team know they will only make things worse.
All right, we're gonna have to shock him. Clear.
When a CPR team comes in the setting of a patient in cardiac arrest, one of the very common things you might consider doing is giving epinephrine, which would be a great drug to give in most settings, except in the setting of epinephrine-induced cardiac arrest. Then you'd be basically giving the patient a double dose.
If Gilbert gives an injection of epinephrine to kill this person, and the doctors come in and they give him more epinephrine, you tell me, how are they going to find out that she's using epinephrine to kill these people?
Incredibly, despite the double epinephrine dose, Henry Houdin survives. For the moment.
45 minutes go by. All of a sudden, another code is called by Gilbert on Houdin. He goes back into this cardiac arrest.
Clear.
Investigators believe she injected him for a second time. They save him again. This was a strong man. He fought for his life. He wanted to live, this guy. He wasn't gonna let a 30-year-old soccer mom take his life from him, okay?
Twice more that night, the CPR team is called to Henry Houdin.
Another code is called. Lo and behold, another code. Oh my God, on Henry Houdin. He goes into massive cardiac arrest, but this time they just cannot save him. He goes brain dead. They cannot save his life.
Kristen's tracks are covered by legitimate doses of epinephrine.
people have to think about looking for it. It's not something that's commonly looked for as a cause of death, especially if you're not considering homicide.
So why does Kristen kill people she hardly knows? Prosecutors believe her motive is ego.
During code situations, she was the go-to nurse. She was the take-charge nurse. She took charge of them codes. She gave orders. She directed traffic. She knew exactly what to do.
Criminal profiler Dr. Deborah Sherman Coughlin recognizes this behavior. It's known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
Munchausen is a condition where typically it's a caregiver who will harm either a child or someone who's in his or her care, and then come in and act like a hero in order to get a high and attention and look like a hero. And they crave that excitement, and so they do that over and over and over again.
And there was one person Kristen wanted to impress more than anyone, her lover, the hospital security guard.
When she would inject her victims with the epinephrine, the security guard always had to come to the codes. He was required to do that. And she would flirt with the security guard when she was coding the victims and killing the victims.
During one code, one nurse reported, Gilbert was on top of a patient, straddling a patient like one would straddle a horse. She lifts up her skirt. "Look at my garter." And she wanted to show it off while a poor man is fighting for his life.
Kristen Gilbert will regret her final bid for attention. Disguising her voice, she makes a series of bomb threats to the hospital.
Yeah, police officer Prospect, may I help you?
This is my last call. In 25 minutes, I'll see you in hell.
Narcissists, they have to act out. They need an audience. This phone gave her the stage to reach her audience at the Veterans Affairs Hospital.
Police trace the call, finding Kristen's fingerprints on the phone.
It was her undoing because about a week after making this phone call, they got the search warrant, they got their evidence, and they made an arrest. They found this handbook of poisoning, tattered and torn, in the pantry of her home. And they also found intravenous medications. This book, what is the page that's ripped out? What is the page that's most tattered and torn in this book? The page is epinephrine. So she was clearly studying this page.
Kristen's homework doesn't surprise Dr. Deborah Sherman Coughlin.
What I found when I interviewed female serial killers was that they would get books on pathology, criminal investigation, forensic science, and then they would read that information, learn about that information, incorporate it into their fantasies first, and then begin experimenting and use that in their crimes. They learn all about criminal investigation and killing to find out the perfect way to do it without getting caught.
But Kristen does get caught. Not by toxicology, but by traditional police work. She's serving 4 consecutive life sentences for murder. Some believe there may have been more.
Authorities explained to me that there's a possibility that she could have killed 75 people. If that's true, then she would be one of the most prolific serial killers in this country.
Kristen Gilbert, like Marianne Cotton and Nanny Doss, crossed a line few would dare, from fantasy to deathly reality. A choice also made by a woman in Canberra, Australia, as she struggled between good and evil.
All I was thinking of was getting rid of him. That was the first thing that entered my mind. I said, this man's got to go.
Anne-Marie Hughes tells a disturbing story of the time she tries to poison her husband.
Now, he has been complaining about, oh, I feel sick for years and years and years. Well, my mind turned and I said, well, I'll bloody give you something to make you feel sick, you bugger.
I think that sometimes we can get angry and we may think about, gosh, that person really upset me, and boy, wouldn't it be nice if that person weren't here anymore. But the problem comes in when you start taking steps to make that fantasy into reality, and that's what Anne-Marie did.
Anne-Marie's fourth marriage is in crisis. She believes it to be an irretrievable breakdown. Divorce is in the cards. She's done it twice before. This time, she chooses a different path.
I met up with a clairvoyant. She said that he wouldn't live a long life. And she thought it would be a good idea that Mr. Hughes should go. So it was her idea. She's the one that talked me into the oleander.
The clairvoyant strenuously denies any involvement. But for whatever reason, Anne-Marie buys several oleander plants.
What did I do? I cut the leaves off, because they're only miniature plants, only tiny plants about 18 inches. So I just cut the leaves off and just put the roots in and boiled it.
Oleander is a very, very commonly available plant. It grows on the roadside. In many countries, it's planted by municipalities because they produce beautiful flowers and long, slender leaves, and they're very hardy and they grow very well.
They're also deadly, containing a chemical which, if ingested, disrupts the heartbeat.
Cardioactive steroids, like what you find in oleander, interfere with the way the heart depolarizes and repolarizes, the way the heart beats and relaxes.
Well, I just poured a little bit in, like that.
Anne-Marie believes her marriage troubles will soon be over.
I felt bad about it, but I said, I've got to do this just to show this man that he can be brought to heel like everybody else. I had approached him to go to marriage guidance counselling, and he didn't hear me. He never wore his hearing aids, and all I ever got from him was, I can't hear you. In other words, he turned the hearing aid off so he couldn't hear. And I just said, well, something's got to give.
I guess tuning a car would be one way to look at it. If you time it a little too early, you don't burn your fuel efficiently. If you time it a little too late, you don't burn your fuel efficiently. If you time it far too much on either side, the engine just won't start. Altering in either direction, which is exactly what a cardioactive steroid would do, could produce a malfunctioning heart.
The initial dose induces only a mild illness. Her husband's and her own reaction is not what Anne-Marie expects.
Oh God, I should not be doing this. And then I'd stop it for a while.
It will be the first of several doses. Anne-Marie is in torment.
It's not very pleasant trying to take someone's life. He was going through a lot of bad symptoms, And he said, "Oh God, if this is life, what is death?"
Fortunately for Anne-Marie and her husband, oleander's cardioactive steroids don't accumulate in the body.
So you'd have an acute poisoning, it would go away over the next day or two, and the symptoms you experienced would resolve, and then you'd have another episode of acute poisoning which would resolve until the dose got just right.
But Anne-Marie never gets the dose just right. In fact, when she isn't poisoning her husband, she's trying to save him with massage.
I did the cleansing of the stomach with the hands. That's, you go around across the top there and down there, and you follow the line of the bowel, and you get rid of all the stuff.
Anne-Marie finds herself torn between wife and killer.
Seeing how you're making someone suffer, and then, you know, trying to do something about it. You've got, like, it gives you like that you've got a dual personality.
For 6 weeks, Anne-Marie lives a double life until instinct wins out.
I went into one of my neighbours who was living next door and told them what had happened, and they rang the police, and that's when I ended up in the position I am.
Anne-Marie confesses and is charged with endangering her husband's life. While she's in jail, she's diagnosed with severe depression and slides further downhill. At her trial a year later, the judge orders her release on medical grounds.
Oftentimes, these offenders have high stress levels in their lives. They're unhappy, they've been unhappy all of their lives, they feel put upon, they feel they have too many burdens. And so killing for them is often a form of stress relief.
It's mind-boggling what I went through. And now I look back, I wonder how I had the courage and the conviction to do it. But then when you're pushed beyond your limit with years of abuse, what else can you do?
Homicidal poisoning affects more than its victims. Perpetrators, survivors, friends, and relatives are left grappling for answers.
The court believes that the people and legislature of our Christian and enlightened state have never contemplated...
In the McFarland Library at the University of Tulsa, Sherby Green finds an original recording from the trial of Nanny Doss.
This court has never heard of any woman being put to death for any crime in Oklahoma. It may happen.
Sherby's hoping to hear her cousin to help complete the portrait in her mind of a lost woman looking for love.
I believe Nanny killed her husbands because none of them came up to her expectations. They all kept letting her down. One was, a womanizer. One was a drunkard. One was too religious, so whenever she found disappointment with the current husband, she disposed of him and went on to the next one.
I therefore sentence you, Nanny Doss, to a term of imprisonment for your natural life in the state penitentiary.
Disappointingly, only the judge is recorded, leaving just one place left to explore. Oklahoma State Penitentiary, where Nanny spent her final days.
Okay, so this is the actual place where Nanny was...
Right, this is the actual building where she was housed. It's been closed about 2 years.
Nanny died here of leukemia, 10 years to the day of her imprisonment.
This is the actual housing unit where she would have done time, and there would have been beds in here, and this would be it. If you was expecting cells, I'm afraid we disappointed you a little bit.
I had read a couple of the articles in the newspaper where she had said that they wouldn't allow her to work in the kitchen.
Right, but they let her sew, and then of course their laundry was a big job.
Given Nanny's history, I can't very well blame them for not letting her work in the kitchen.
I wouldn't want her working in my kitchen either. Okay.
It's wondering what she thought, how she felt. Did she stand at that window and look out and ask herself, why? Why did I do this? Why did I take those lives? Why did I put myself in this place?
The answers may lie in a place Sherby hasn't considered. A place of pain for the Sisterhood of Poisonous Women.
Dr. Sherman, please.
Yeah, speaking.
Dr. Sherman, this is Sherby Green. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Nanny.
Well, Nanny appears to be a psychopath who doesn't have the same feelings of concern or caring or bonding with others that you or I might have.
For almost 2 decades, Dr. Deborah Sherman Coughlin has drilled into criminal minds.
She would view them as burdens to be gotten rid of so that she could get what she wanted. And really,
she's convinced murderous women all have something in common: a troubled childhood.
Okay.
Well, what we see in the backgrounds of Nanny Doss and Marianne Cotton are the horrific upbringing, the terribly poor childhood, the abusive childhood, the lack of attachment and bonding evident from an early age.
Nanny grew up in rural Alabama. Although a friendly community, her hot-headed father kept her in virtual isolation. Socializing was forbidden. Marianne Cotton's childhood was also repressed. Already poor, her father fell to his death in a coal mine, plunging the family further into hardship. Kristen Gilbert had difficulties as a teenager. The more she became alienated, the more she developed a pattern of lies and deceit. Anne Marie Hughes suffered unspeakable brutality from those she felt should have loved her.
My father-in-law continually raped me for many years, and I couldn't do anything about it because I didn't know what to do. No love shown. No love was given to us as children. I didn't know what love was all about. I still don't. I find it very hard sometimes to show any feelings. I can hide my feelings pretty well, don't you worry. I've had to learn.
Dr. Sherman Coughlin believes this early powerlessness begins a tragic, unattainable quest.
Because they have no control over their lives, they begin to turn inward psychologically, and they begin to fantasize about the perfect life. They fantasize about a Prince Charming, an idealized romance to take them away. Then they find out that reality is not as good as fantasy, and they cannot deal with it. And so their fantasies then turn from something that's pleasant, such as a nice family environment, to something that's a bit more dark.
From this darkness, Sherby Green can find some light.
She was in search of the perfect love. And we all know that there's no such thing as a perfect love. I'm sorry for her in one sense because she never found what she looked for. It saddens me to know that there's not just her, but so many people in the world who search for that inner peace.
The deeds of these 4 women have been exposed. But, disturbingly, Dr. Sherman Coughlin believes many are not.
Female poisoners can get away with their crimes. They hide behind the fact that people don't want to believe that a female could commit such an atrocious crime. Male serial killers make up approximately 85% of all convicted serial killers, while female serial killers only make up about 15%. But just because the incarceration figures are only 15% doesn't mean that women aren't killing more. It just means they're better at what they do. There are female killers and poisoners out there that we don't know about, just simply because they're not being detected. They're still out there.